Hello and welcome to the Bad Spot and to this week a somewhat different video. Now, I'm sure like a lot of you, I have been really enjoying the recent Disney Plus show Andor. Now, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I've been feeling pretty burnt out by the current grind of endless content, most of it not really my cup of tea, so I was apprehensive about this show. However, after one episode, I was fully invested, fully drawn into this world of fledgling rebellion, ISB machinations, and seeing a world that we know and love from the movies fleshed out rather than padded out. And whilst it was airing, I saw quite a few people saying how similar the world of Andor was to the worlds in their Starforged campaigns. And that was very cool. But that also got me thinking about when Starforged was first announced and how a lot of people said they could see themselves playing a Starforged campaign in the vein of another Disney Plus Star Wars show, The Mandalorian. And I thought that was very interesting because they would both be valid approaches in terms of styles of games inspired by two very different shows. And I think it's worth talking about because I think there are quite a lot of lessons you can learn from both Andor and The Mandalorian in terms of approaching not only your Starforged games, but I suppose any long form role playing campaign. And you could talk for hours about this and cover a huge variety of topics, but in this video, I wanted to specifically talk about how each of these shows approach their structure. What sets Andor apart from a lot of its contemporaries is its structure. The season is 12 episodes long and divided in a really clever way into separate arcs that tell their own story, have their own settings and characters and antagonists, their own build-up and release of tension. And those arcs all feed into a wider story, but they also work as these smaller, more focused, mostly self-contained stories. It's rare to see a show structured like this, but it's a very clever way to approach long-form storytelling, and it allows us to get fully invested in what is happening, build relationships with the characters, and not feel like you're rushing madly from one place to another. And Starforged can feel a bit like this sometimes, as the dice send you off on a tangent away from your main quest, as complications and twists in the story see you diverted off course into the long grass. And I think that it's tempting sometimes to just try and rush through things and pull back to the main story as quickly as possible, but Andor shows you can take your time while still tying it all together. In Andor, we have the introductory trio of episodes on Ferrix, then the arc with the heist on Aldhani, and then the arc in the prison camp. And these all have their own characters, dynamics, and stakes. And none of them feel rushed or incidental. And they all in some way tie into the main story, and not always just in terms of plotting or world building. They all tie in thematically or help us understand the characters and their motivations. And completely by accident, this is something that I've done on the show. I've always been pretty wary of moving on from things too quickly, so whenever I've ended up somewhere that I did not intend as part of the main story, I've tried to take my time and use these diversions as opportunities to develop the narrative, to build depth into the relationships, and make thematic connections between what is happening. In season 1, we had the arc on Rust, which was supposed to be just a quick refuel and layover, but ended up being a 4 or 5 episode stretch of really kind of important stuff happening. And it's also where we met Luna, who is now the show's co-lead. And after that, we had the arc on Paxton Hold, where Archer finally caught up with Blake Sutton, and we found out how all this tied into the Iron Gate network. Then we had the arc with Keelan and Santos and Mahari Outpost, and we've kind of all seen where that's led. And season 2, we've had several arcs. We've had the Verdant World, where Archer discovered the Arc Dragons and met Cole and his crew, and they're still on board his ship right now. We've had the Spine of Kronos and the Precursor Vault, and then more recently we've had the Purgatory Outpost and the Algorithm. All these little stories are part of a bigger one, and they could very easily have all been things that I just blew past, characters that I barely mentioned, places that I just stopped by before moving on. But if you do stick around and take the time to try and make these things matter, try and make these things part of the main story rather than diversions from it, then you can end up deepening the connections between the characters, enriching the narrative, and strengthening all the thematic elements you have at play. And this is in stark contrast to our other show, The Mandalorian, which, whilst I didn't quite connect with in the same way that I did Andor, is still a very enjoyable show, albeit structured very differently. When the show first aired, I saw multiple people refer to it as a show full of side quests, and that is a pretty accurate description, and I actually mean that in a positive way. There is an overarching story in The Mandalorian, but the appeal is the pulpy adventures that our heroes go on from week to week. There are supporting characters in the show, but they're not ones we build strong relationships with. They exist mainly to serve the plot or be obstacles to our main character. And the show is episodic. It is structured like a series of side quests. You need to do a thing, but to do it, you need to go here and get this. But to get that, you need the help from these people to do this. But to help them do that, you need to do this other thing, and so on and so forth. And what you get when you structure a show like this is the ability to have these thrilling action set pieces where you need minimal setup but get maximum payoff in terms of excitement. Which is why the show takes place in a lot of settings you already know, or features characters or recognisable alien species from other Star Wars media, because there's already a shorthand there. You don't need to explain Tatooine because we've been there before. You don't need to explain who Ahsoka is because if you're a Star Wars fan, you know already. And even if you don't, you at least know what a Jedi is. Building these relationships or forging deeper thematic connections is not what The Mandalorian is about. It is a show about setting up and resolving these weekly, exciting mini-adventures as economically as possible. And if you lean into it, that is a great way to run a Starforged campaign. Just roll with whatever is in front of you each session and don't fret too much about tying it back to a bigger story. Just try and make your sessions punchy and enjoyable and not concern yourself too much with sticking around after you've achieved what you're trying to do. I've played in games like this, and if you give yourself over to the fact that you will be more a leaf on the breeze at the whims of the dice, you can have an immense amount of fun with it. Like I said, I could talk about the parallels between shows like these and role-playing games all day, but this is just a quick little video about structure, and I thought they would be interesting. Let me know what you think, and also let me know if there's any other media that you've pulled inspiration from when playing your games of Ironsworn or Starforged. And please leave a like, subscribe and click the little bell icon, and do check out the Bad Spot Patreon for early access to the campaign and more videos like this. I'll be back next time, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.